Hello, Internet, and thank you very much for joining us on the Paralus community call. This is March 16, and we will be doing a live. We're doing go about some of the Paralus update. So let me quick intro about what we are discussing today and what's the agenda for today. So we have seen developers are often forced to work on the repetitive things whenever they start developing a new service or an application. Repetitive tasks may include creating boilerplate code, template for new service that already exists, setting up a test bed, spinning up dev test environment. And for the platform teams, repetitive tasks include setting up RBAC, revoking permissions, pre-configuring role across clusters, namespace, projects, and more. And this is what Parallels does best by giving you the ability to create a custom role, users and groups, dynamic and intermediate changing and revoking a permission, ability to control access via pre-configured role across cluster, namespace, projects, and more. I think the best way to describe Parallels is to make it possible to secure remote cluster from anywhere, ensuring that changes to environment can be made safe and self-service. Today, I'm joined by core maintainer to showcase the newest release and some more good news that deserve attention. But let's go straight to our maintainers. Thank you very much, Atul, for joining the call.
Hey, thanks a lot, Sam. Very good evening and good morning to everyone who's joining in. I'm Atul, one of the maintainers of Paralus. And, Sam has already given a good introduction about what it is. We'll just go through the call and discuss a lot more exciting things.
Thank you, Nirav. Thank you for joining the
Hello.
call.
Thanks, Sam, for having me over. Super excited to join the second call that we are having for Paralus. We were looking forward, to have community calls since a long time, and it's glad to be here. So, good morning, good evening, everybody. We'll discuss more about what's been brewing at Paralus.
Hello, Vinu. How are you?
Hey, good evening, Saim, and good evening, everyone. This is Venu joining. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you. So I'm going to the our uh, meeting minutes today for the Paris community call. I will share the link in the today as well. So let's talk about because one of the things I think we actually people kind to know what are the different components work in the parallels to solve some of the customer or some of the community challenge the problems that they're facing. So Atul is actually spent a lot of time. He's one of the earliest contributor to the parallels, so he will dive us deeper into how these different components work. So if anybody interested in contributing to parallels in future, he can actually give us a good overview. So over to you, Atul, and let us know how the architecture of the core component works.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Sam. So, what I'll be doing now, over the couple of few minutes, we'll be talking about the core architecture of Parallels. And for all the folks who are joining in or who have been using Parallels, I would suggest you can visit our website to understand what Parallels is, how it does, because we already discussed this in earlier call. And probably Sam will share the link as well for the previous community call where we spoke about Parallels and length. Today we'll be focusing on a couple of things which is quite core to the Parallels architecture, how it basically achieves the zero trust functionality that we have. So the components in Parallels are divided into two main chunks. One is obviously the core component, and the second is the miscellaneous components that get installed along with it. So what you're seeing right now on your screen is actually the architecture of Parallels, how it works. So on the right-hand side, you have all the target clusters that you have. So you can have a cluster in GCP, you can have it in Azure or any other Kubernetes environment that you have, which can be behind a firewall. And Parallels sits right outside your firewall, and your developers can or users can interact with Parallels using the browser, using Kubectl, using your normal command line, and that's how they interact with Parallels. And Parallels then interacts with the target cluster. So let us first look into the core component. So Sam, if you can just click on that core components, let us just go to that page. Right. So if you see here, the core components over here include a couple of things, or rather 5 things. First is Parallels, which is the actual core where the actual stuff happens of zero trust, access management, and everything else. Then we have relay, we have CLI, which is the command line. We'll talk about the dashboard, and then we have a prompt. So starting with Paralus, like we told, it's the core of everything. That's where all the access control mechanisms happen. So internally, there are three projects that Paralus uses. The first one is called Kratos, and Kratos is an open source library which is used for identity and user management. So if you all know about this company called Ori, so this is an open source product by Ori, and this basically takes care of the entire user and identity management. So, and it has its own deployment. So Paralus internally uses Kratos. And if you have seen our blog post or the websites or earlier community call, Paralus also supports different identity providers. So you can integrate Paralus with GitHub, GitLab, Google, and so on. So all these functionalities are actually taken care of by Kratos internally. So anything related to user management, identity, third-party interaction, Kratos is the module which handles everything. And again, like I said, it's an open source module. The next one is Casbin. So Casbin basically is the library which actually enforces the policies. So in Paralus, what we do is everything happens in groups. So we have a group. So initially we have an organization. Under the organization, we have groups. And within groups, we have different users. So we give access to different users for different groups. So we will have a group, let's say, project read only. We will have a group, it would be project write only. We have super admin. So these are the groups that we create within Paralus, and we assign users to this group. So what Casbin basically does is it ensures that whatever policies we have defined in terms of permissions for different roles as well as groups, Casbin ensures that these are applied. So once these are applied, it will take care of how the clusters are imported, whether users are created or not, because this is a permission. So when I say project read, a user should not be able to give a write command on a particular cluster. So he would not be able to create resources in a cluster. So all those things are taken care of by Cascade. So if you're dealing with anything related to permissions and the policies, then Cascade is the module where all the things happen. The third module, which is part of Paralus core, is Sentry. So Sentry basically is an internal package to Paralus, and what it essentially does is that it generates a unique kubeconfig file. So what Paralus does is that every time a user logs in, he can use, obviously, they can use the dashboard to interact with different clusters. But then there's also a feature where they can download a kubeconfig file. So each kubeconfig file is actually tied up to a particular user. So Sentry helps in ensuring that there is a unique kubeconfig file that is generated for every user. And then what it also does is that it provides an endpoint for all the kubectl requests. So as a user, when I run any kubectl command, Sentry is providing me an endpoint, and it also sits there and checks the authentication part, and it maps it to the user profile. So anything that I do with roles, the different roles that I'm creating, the role bindings that I'm doing, and also the kubeconfig. So anything related to the users, their roles, and kubeconfigs is taken care of by Sentry. So essentially, if you see, the Paralus core actually takes care of all the access management, identity management, the policy enforcement, and also the kubeconfig file generation and the role binding stuff. So that's pretty much what the Paralus core does. The diagram, if you go to our page and see this diagram essentially shows in different ways how a user interacts with Paralus and what are the different components and how a particular request goes. So for example, a request is coming in, let's say, from a browser. So from browser, it will go to our component called contour, which is the service that we have, ingress, which is there. From there, it goes on to Paralus core, which basically goes to Kratos, takes the permission, then comes to Casbin, and so on and so forth. So if you want to understand how a particular request or an action flows in Paralus, this is the diagram where you will talk about it. So that was about Paralus core. The next important component that we have over here is relay. And within relay, we have a couple of things. So we have a relay server and we have a relay client. So one of the great features or the USP of Paralus is that you don't need to poke holes in your firewall. So I'm sure a lot of enterprise users have clusters on-prem or on the cloud as well, which would be definitely behind a particular firewall. Now, one of the best things, like I said about Paralus, is that you don't have to do any modifications in your firewall for Paralus to interact with the cluster that you have, the target cluster that you have. And that is achieved through the through the relay component. So the relay server essentially is a Cube API proxy, and it takes care of the access policies that is to be that is to be applied. And what it does is it actually listens to a couple of domain names, sorry, or rather endpoints. So if you have gone through our Parallels installation, you know these are a couple of endpoints where actually the relay server is. So any query that goes in, it will be taken care of at these two endpoints only. So one is your star.user.domain.com or whatever domain name, and the other one is the core connector. So it's these two endpoints where the actual API request connections are accepted. And then it also takes care of the client-side service certificate validation also. So, we have Paralus is also a certifying authority. So all the TLS side, certificate termination that or validation that happens at this particular module. So that's pretty much about what the relay server does. Now, the relay agent is essentially a component that sits inside your target cluster. So, for example, you're trying to pull in a cluster which is, let's say, hosted on GCP or it is hosted on Azure or on-prem. So, when you want to pull these clusters into Paralus, what we do is essentially we run a small agent on the cluster, and this agent basically establishes a gRPC connection with the Sentry service that we have. So in Paralus core, I just spoke about Sentry, which is basically providing the role bindings and the role access. So the relay agent actually talks to it through a gRPC connection, and then eventually it connects to the relay server. And then whatever requests that are sent to, or whenever an interaction happens with the target cluster, it's the relay agent which actually forwards all the kubectl requests to the Cube API server internally. And this is again based on the user policy that is in place. So accordingly, it internally creates a service account which is just in time. So in fact, I have a detailed blog post on Paralus where I talk about how this entire just-in-time service account creation happens, and then how the entire flow, the request flow happens from your relay server to the relay agent, and how the entire interaction happens with the target cluster. So these were the two components, the two major components, if I can say, for Paralus, the Paralus core and the relay. The third one is CLI, which is the command line interface, and we call it as PCTL. This is essentially a CLI binary that we provide with Paralus. And currently, you actually need to install Paralus dashboard to run the CLI. But in the roadmap, Neerav will talk about that in the coming sections. So in the roadmap, we also have to we have a plan to ensure that the users are able to run the PCTL binary even without having the Paralus dashboard in place. So currently that is what it does. And so once the PCTL binary is installed, you can essentially do all the things that you can do on a Paralus dashboard through your command line, which is a PCTL. So you'll have commands to create an organization, create a user, import a cluster, so on. Again, the documentation, you will find how to use PCTL. The next component is the dashboard, which is the heart of everything at the moment. So all the blogs, documents, videos that you would have seen, Paralus dashboard is where all the action happens. So this is actually where the user actually interacts with the Paralus system and also tries to, create organizations, groups, projects, permissions, pulling in clusters. So that all happens through the dashboard. And one of the components within the dashboard is prompt. And it is basically a web-based command line tool, CLI interface, that is provided in Paralus. So essentially what it does is that once you are actually pulling in a cluster or importing a cluster to Paralus, let's say you want to run a kubectl command on that imported cluster and see what's going on. So prompt is the one that gives you a web-based CLI. So if you use the Paralus dashboard or if you have seen it, the moment you select the cluster and you say kubectl, you immediately have a prompt which is at the bottom of the screen where you can run all your kubectl commands. So prompt is essentially that. So a quick recap of all the core components. We spoke about Paralus, which is the core Paralus core, which has three components in it: Kratos, Caspian, and Sentry, which are responsible for all identity management, access, policies, so on and so forth, role bindings. The next component is relay, again, which has a relay server and relay client, a relay agent, and this is responsible for connecting, or rather ensuring there is a connection between Paralus and your target cluster. So both of them are able to talk. So that is what relay does. And then you have CLI, which is like a command line tool where you can interact with Paralus using CLI. Dashboard is the Paralus dashboard that you use. And eventually we have the prompt, which is basically the web-based CLI that you provide. So that's where you just go connect to your cluster, run the commands, and do that. So this is a very high level overview of the core components of Paralus. So in case any of you is using Paralus, or is interested to contribute, I'm sure you now have some idea about where to look for. So for example, if you're using Paralus and you're having issues with user management, that you're not able to apply some enforce some policy, or there is some bug when it is coming to identity management, now you know that where you have to look. So it would be issue with some trade-off module or some Castle module. Similarly, if there is some issue with the connectivity, you have to check it in relay. So these are the core components that we have for Paralus, and we'll quickly go into the miscellaneous components. So these are the components which are also installed with Paralus, and what it does is that basically you can have these components installed, or you can even ignore them if you, depending on the infrastructure that you have, depending on the setup. So currently there are 5 of them, and out of these, a couple of them are optional. So the first one is PostgreSQL database. That is the heart of entire Paralus project that we have. So anything related to Paralus configuration, settings, and data, everything actually happens in the PostgreSQL database. So whatever configuration settings, anything that happens in the Paralus ecosystem is actually stored. So this is the back end, or a backbone rather, if I can say, for Paralus. The next component is Elasticsearch. So Elasticsearch was, again, it's an open source distributed search and analytic tool that we were using this along to store the Kubectl logs and the audit logs that are generated. And we were using it to basically for an audit log feature that we have. Now we realized that in the initial stages, what was happening was the resource requirement was too much when it came to using Elasticsearch. And that's when we, along with the feedback from the community, decided that we need to move to an alternative option where Paralus actually has a lesser footprint, but it achieves the same functionality. So from version 0.1.9, we decided to make Postgres DB as the default. So now it also stores the audit logs and the Kubectl logs, along with all the configuration settings that we have. So if you're using version 0.1.9 and earlier, then Elasticsearch will be there. After 0.1.9, it's an optional component. So if your infrastructure already has Elastic in place, then you can definitely enable this in the configuration, just pass in the URL credentials, and it will be, just dumping the logs collected into your Elastic server that we have. To work with this, we had FileBeat, which is again a log collection tool. And this was used to collect the logs and forward it to the Elastic server. Now, again, since this was used with Elastic, this again is an optional component at the moment. So one thing to note here is that if you are using the Elasticsearch, then you need to install, you need to enable FileBeat as well. Otherwise, by default, if you are installing Paralus at the moment, it will go with PostgreSQL without Elasticsearch and FileBeat. The next component is FluentBit. So it is again a lightweight open source project that is used for log collection, processing, and forwarding. And since the time we have had PostgreSQL as the backbone of Paralus, FluentBit has become a part of it. So it is a required component. So if you are using PostgreSQL going with default, so you will have PostgreSQL as well as FluentBit. If you already have Elasticsearch and you don't want to use Postgres, then obviously we have an option that you can configure your installation. So in that case, you use Elastic, you use FileBeat. So Elastic and FileBeat together, FluentBit and Postgres together. It entirely depends on your setup, on your infrastructure, what you want to use. The last component here is Contour, which is it's an open source, Kubernetes ingress controller that is there. So it provides a control plane for the Envoy Edge and the service proxy. And currently it is used as an Nginx replacement in Paralus. So if you have any other ingress controller as well that you are using and you probably want to bring in, apart from Contour, you can definitely get in. In fact, we would be more than happy that if you're using something and you want it to be integrated with Parallels, or give it as an option. And if you've tried, especially, and if you're able to do it, your contributions are welcome. You can share the configurations with us. You can contribute to the project. It can be a code project if you feel there are some configuration changes required. If you want to use another ingress controller apart from Contour, definitely feel free to just raise a PR or raise an issue, talk to the maintainers, see what are the configuration changes required, and contribute. In case you want to do a non-code contribution that you have been able to successfully integrate a different ingress controller, then you can definitely do that. You can reach out to me, you can reach out to Sam, and we can have a documentation update. You can basically list down the steps on how we can use this various components or the various ingress controller that you are using. So these were essentially the miscellaneous components that Paralus has, and with that, that's basically the end of the very high level overview of all the components, the core components, as well as the miscellaneous components. So by now, if you want to contribute to Parallels, or if you are facing issues with Parallels, you know the place where you have to look out for a problem. So if it's a problem with network, you go to Relay. If it's a problem with data storage, you go to PostgreSQL. So now you know which component does what. It's just about now exploring and contributing more. So that's pretty much it from my side on the components part and the architecture overview that I had to give. Before I pass it on to Neerav, a quick update on one of the recent updates, or a good thing that happened with Paralus was we had KCD Pakistan, which was the first ever KCD event in Pakistan. My friend Sam was quite generous, and he was in fact the host. And Paralus got an opportunity to be there, and it was a conference attended by more than 150 folks in Pakistan, and it was an in-person event for all the folks there. We gave a quick demo of what Paralus was, and the whole story was about how we moved from a perimeter-based security to a zero trust model, securing your Kubernetes cluster. So if you want to know how that went, what happened, we have a blog post there. There's also a YouTube video with the entire talk that I gave. So feel free to go there. You'll get a good idea of how security landscape is changing, how the threat landscape is changing. From sending worms and Trojan through floppy disk and CDs, now we are having DDoS attacks and social phishing and all those stuff. So the threats are evolving, as well as at the same time our means of protecting our systems are also evolving. So that's pretty much from the KCD event. There's a blog post on the CNCF website on the experience of the KCD. Feel free and go ahead and read about that. That's all. That's all from my end. I'll hand it over back to Sam if he wants to add something to this.
Thanks, Atul. Thanks, Atul. It's been a super useful information as well, because a lot of the people is actually start running and installing the Paralus, and they see if they feel issues like my dashboard is not working, my network is not properly set up, my Ingress is not going to work up. So I think this is the 20 minutes gives you the overview. If to find a problem where you actually land into what the best place to do the troubleshooting is very important. Thank you very much for actually putting this all information together. And also thank you very much for on your collaboration with the KCD Pakistan. It's been a wonderful event. We have a lot of contribution for the different speaker around the world. So definitely check out the blog post as well. So now, as the time is running short, so I will go to the Neerav on the newest release that is basically come up in a few days ago. And Neerav will talk about what is actually back in here. So Neerav, over to you now.
Yep, thanks, Sam. So yeah, first of all, great overview over there, Atul. So that actually gave a lot of insights about the various components that we have. So that was amazing. So now let's move on to the releases. So I'll briefly talk about the recent release that we did in February. That happened almost 2 weeks ago. So along with all the features, right, that Atul had been talking about, there's one in particular which is just-in-time service account creation, right? So JIT, there is a blog post, as Atul mentioned. Do read that. So what used to happen was earlier we used to have a 8-hour window, right? So after 8 hours, the agent used to go back and check if there is any stale service account that has not been used for almost 8 hours. It used to remove that, and this is another way of ensuring that our systems are secure. we don't leak any service accounts at the target agent, which can be misused by any other users, right? So this is another feature adding to the zero trust security. And this particular configuration was hard coded, right? So you couldn't change it. But there have been requests from the community and other customers who've been using zero trust for quite some time, that hey, I should be able to configure this. What if I want to keep it for probably 24 hours or even 30 days for that matter, right? Or maybe as less as 10 minutes. So now we've added that feature to 0.2.1 release, where if you go to the dashboard organization settings, you will be able to see a new configuration setting for service account lifetime, and you will be able to set it as low as 10 and max 1 month as of now. So that is one feature that has gone in. And then there were a few bug fixes. So we do have a few users who've been actively, trying to use Parallels in their organizations, and they were generous enough to come up with a bunch of issues that they have faced during their setup. So we were able to fix a few. So one was when you go to the roles and you try to add in a namespace or attach a namespace role. Currently, there was a drift between the namespaces regex that you can actually create in Kubernetes, whereas what you can give over here in Parallels, right? So that has been now fixed. So now you will be able to give the exact same namespace that you have created in the Kubernetes. So earlier, something with an hyphen was not accepted by Parallels, but it was indeed accepted by the Kubernetes namespace creation. So that is fixed now. Then moving on, so there was another issue where we were not able to delete IDP users. So although this was a minor one, so we had the backend which was actually doing the delete, but we have not exposed that in the dashboard. So that change we had. So now, if you're creating or onboarding an OIDC provider and having users use Parallels, it is even possible for you to delete the user directly from the dashboard, and that will eliminate the access given to that user. So that was another one. So these were a few issues that we have worked upon. Uh, so yeah, that's what it is.
Thanks, Nero. Wonderful overview. And I think these are the very important, I think, we thankful to the Ethans who actually made some of the, he raised some of the bugs on our repository. And we actually, thanks to the wonderful team behind the Parallels, they make it a very quick update into this project. I think, and these are the very general problem when we see like we want to delete IDP user. And that's a very good use case because we don't want to set up for an entire lifetime. Service account creation, that's another good issue. I think it definitely will try to ask people to go ahead and figure this out as well. And we have a new release coming up, I think in March 30th, and we will talk about is what is actually our newest um, big thing that we're working on. Over to you, Vino, now, and I will sharing the link on what's the next milestone is coming up. Over to you, Vino.
Thanks, Sai. Are you going to share the link, the new features?
Yes, yes, absolutely. I will share. I'm sharing here. Just give me a second.
Hey, I'm having some trouble actually sharing my.
Yes, we can go ahead. I think you can see my screen now. We are sharing the screen. You can just go ahead with. I hope you can see. Everybody can see my screen. There's a link I can add on the YouTube as well. Here's a link. You can go to the Paralus milestone 14, and this is a V0.2.2 that Steam is working on. And we will shed some light on who raised these issues and what we're actually working on.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sam, again. I can see the screen. So yeah, the very first issue, generally, it's a rookie mistake a lot of people make, right? When you actually go and create a cluster on the RFA, and you're going to get a YAML file which you can go ahead and implement or install, and run that YAML file, apply the YAML file on a cluster, which is actually going to install the agent in the cluster. Essentially, the agent should come back, connect back to the cluster, sorry, the controller, which is how the cluster will be visible in the Paralus controller. A rookie mistake, what generally people do is they just download one YAML file and use the same YAML file and trying to run it or apply it on multiple clusters. This generally causes unexpected results on the controller. Essentially, it will be confusing. You are going to will not be able to see both the clusters. However, either you would see a cluster going on and off, and basically, essentially, what would happen is you can actually generate an unexpected problem. So that is the number one issue that many of the new users are going to make, and that problem we are working to go and fix it. So, as Paralus is becoming pretty popular across multiple cloud instances, EKS is one of the most used, the Kubernetes cluster in the world, and we would like to make it easy for people to go ahead and install Paralus, especially on EKS cluster. So that is the second, if at all you want to call an enhancement or issue that we are going to work on in the coming months. The third one is uh, we don't really allow Paralus with project names with slash, and those are some minor issues that which is causing unnecessary headache for the end users. That is something that we would like to go and prioritize and work on in the coming release. Um, um, the following one is typically you will have multiple groups that we are going to receive from OIDC, and we need to find a mapping in the cluster so that easy for OIDC groups to be consumed at Paralus level. That is the third one. And the fourth one is some validation that we would like to add. These are some minor issues that we are fixing. So essentially, these are the 5 items that we have top of our list prioritized. But again, I would really look forward for community help to prioritize and bring anything to the top of the list, right? And please help us to identify any other critical issues that you think that we should be prioritizing. But as of now, Saim, this is exactly what we have in mind. So yeah, back
Thank
to
you
you.
very much. Thank you very much, Vino, for the wonderful insight. And one question I see on the Slack right now, some David Martin is saying like, I tried to search about Azure Active Directory as an IDP into Parallels, but he couldn't find anything. Do we support Azure Active Directory as of today? Nirav, can you answer this?
Yeah, no. So at this point, we don't. You're absolutely right in responding to him. So as Atul was mentioning, we do use Kratos, right? So Ori Kratos at the time when we were integrating or we were building Parallels, that time we did not support Azure AD, and that is the reason why we did not initially come up with it. But yes, uh, I believe we'll circle back on that, and there was a request from us made to the Kratos team to enable a few more identity providers or OIDC providers, including Azure AD. So I believe if they have the configuration setting or set up from their side, then we should be able to it's a matter of how we configure it. So I don't expect a lot of changes to Parallels as such. But yeah, at this moment we don't have a integration, or we will not be able to use Azure AD as one of the UIDC providers.
Thanks, Nirav. Thanks, Nirav. And one of the question I can see from the audience, and he's really appreciating the Atul high level overview of how he actually describe some of the components. Can you share, Atul, some of the pointer or brief for anyone who is interested in contributing to Parallels? If I look at the newest release, like five opens solution I have, can you give some pointers like what do how to contribute actually?
Absolutely, absolutely. So thanks a lot, Akshay, for this, really interesting question, because eventually when we talk about open source projects, it all boils down to community and the contributions. So I think for anyone who is looking to contribute to Parallels, be it a code contribution or a non-code contribution, the first place where you need to head to is our GitHub repo. So all you have to do is go to GitHub/Parallels and go to issues. That's the place where you will find open issues that is there. And these issues are raised by the people, the community who are using Parallels. And go through the issues. And if there is anything which you feel, is something that you can help us improve. For instance, sometime back, I remember there was an issue with the dashboard that some action was missing from dashboard. So if you are a newbie into front end, or if you understand front end technology, go ahead, choose that issue, join our Slack channel. The second step, the link is there on the GitHub. Once you are there, join the Slack channel, connect with the maintainer and mention the issue that you want to work on. And any one of us would definitely guide you on what it is and what needs to be done. And that's it. You start working, raise a PR. If you need any help, all of us are here to assist you while you are working on that particular issue. And that's it. Wait for the PR to be merged and let it feature in a new release. And yeah, it's time for you to tell the public that you have made a contribution to an open source project. So it's as simple as that. You essentially start with the repo, identify the issue that you want to work on, jump to the Slack channel, connect with the maintainer, tell them that, okay, boss, this is the issue that I want to work on. Raise a PR, the code review will be done and it will be merged. That's as simple as that it can get. I hope that answers your question, actually.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Actually, you have any more question, feel free to put them on the chat as well. So, final few notes because we have some very good announcements today regarding the event we are supporting coming up. So, Parallels is actually going to the platform con and talking about how the platform engineers actually use Parallels to deliver a self-service model for their team. So Paralus is actually is one of our CFP is submitted and is actually accepted. And in future, if I can scroll down here, you can see some of the speakers for this event, and you soon see some of our contributor be listed here who is actually going to attend the talk there. So that's a good news for our site as well. Another big news is that is Parallels is actually submitted a process of going to the AWS marketplace. And once an AWS marketplace, if you start going in the future, after a few days or after a few weeks, if you go to this link and if you can search for the Parallels, you will see a one-click installer for the Parallels. So this is a container marketplace where Parallels soon to be arrive here. So that's a good thing that we're working on for a very long time. And let's see if I can search Kubectl in here. In future you can go search some of the open source tooling regarding Parallels, and the Parallels will be a one-click installer for the world largest container community for the container community as well. So that's a big news, and you've seen see a few days announcement coming up from the Parallels community. And in we are actually, the KubeCon is happening next month, April of 18th. And if you are in the KubeCon, make sure to meet the team Parallels. There are some our contributors will be there in the KubeCon and will showcase how Parallels can works on solve some of the your problems as well. So make sure to attend the conference and talk to our maintainer as well. and we are not accepted as a CFP. Not a good news from that angle, but soon we'll try to find some place in the KubeCon to talk about Paralus as the community grows and evolves. So that's another good thing. And if you are using the Paralus or the digital marketplace, this is a one-click installer. If you go to this link, search for the Paralus, and the Paralus is actually a one-click installer for you. So that is as simple as is. So it's a one-click installer. So do tell us about your experience of Digital Ocean, how you actually using Paralus as well. So these are the news. We're working on the EWS blueprint. We're working on the PlatformCon CF PlatformCon talk, some KubeCon things we are working on behind the scene. And these are the bigger announcement. And the one big announcement that I want to share, next time we were joining by the AWS team on the 13th of April. We're going live once again. And during the KubeCon, 1 week prior to the KubeCon, and we might do a 2 week episode. We do another week on show on the on the KubeCon and do an AMS session live on this YouTube channel for the Paralus. But 13th of April, we will be doing an AWS demo of the Paralus. So if you are actually watching us today, make sure you actually tune into the 13th April and joining us on the call. And this will be a demo. We will going a live demo with the AWS folks. Tell you by going to the AWS marketplace, clicking on the Paralus and Paralus install, and how you can work on it. So 13th April, we will post this announcement in the LinkedIn and Twitter as well. So before you go, this is our link for the website, paralus.io, where you see all the details. Go to this link and please make a star, because we feel there's a lack of tool in the day two challenges associated with the Kubernetes. And this one is pretty much solving this challenge. And if you are actually using Paralus, this means you're loving it. And if you're loving it, then why not starring it? Is a very confusing for me. So please go and star it. This is our Twitter handle where me and Atul is sharing posts around what's happening, what's coming up in the future. This is actually the release we spoke about. Now you can now it's your turn to install it and configure it and run it and tell you about experience. 2.2 is on the horizon, and the new contributor Akshay, if you're watching us or listening to me, this is the time to go to the contribution page and start contributing. And please check the platform count pages. You see the contributors there. KubeCon, if you're there, we have maintainers coming up. Marketplace, please find an issue if you are unable to run it or have any issues. AWS Marketplace is we work a lot on this for the last 3 months, and I'm really excited. We finally submitted, and is now it's ball on the AWS core to have this published. So these are the blog. One of the case study talk that Atul does is as a great appreciation from the community, and so please join in and share and watch it on your free time. Here's a link for the talks, and here is our Slack. That's very important, where all the things happening. And remember, we are on the Kubernetes Slack as well. Just go to the Kubernetes Slack, search for the Paralus channel, and join in. That's as simple and as easy as. But thank you very much for Atul for a wonderful overview of the different component of the Paralus. And thank you, Nirav, for give us a wonderful insight of what's new coming up in the Paralus V0.2.1. And thank you, Vinu, for joining me on the call and discussing about what our plan for the next release. And we will be going live again for the next month, 13th of April. Thank you very much, maintainers, contributors joining me today. I really appreciate your time. And we'll stay in touch and make Paralus a more even better tool to help people solve their day two Kubernetes challenges. Thank you, everyone. This has been a wonderful time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Wonderful. Bye.